Hey there, folks. Good evening. This is The Way. We're going to cover episodes 2 and 3 of season 2 of The Mandalorian. And I'm glad I waited until I saw episode 3 to react because there's actually a lot to react to. First, I'm just going to get it out of the way. As an arachnophobe, the spider scene in episode 2 it was not okay. It was excellent, but it was just not okay. Actually, there were a lot of like spider-like things apparently in that universe between the spiders themselves and then the kind of octopus squid sort of things that move around a lot like spiders. There's just a lot of like discomfort. But in the midst of that, there was a lot of good stuff too. Episode 2 was what sort of seems like a filler episode, right? At least at first. And that's some of the genius of the writing of the show, is that it doesn't feel terribly connected. But I think that's an important reality also, because we're used to kind of, okay, get in, tell the story, and get out. So ultimately, the whole arc of The Mandalorian is that he needs to get the child to his own kind, to the Jedi. And I'm a little leery of how long that will actually last, just given the sort of chemistry that exists between Mando and the child. I don't know how long we're gonna see the little ones stick with the Jedi, but I guess we'll cross that bridge whenever we come to it. But I like the fact that the show kind of showcases that, you know what, the small stuff matters. I mean, you ultimately see that Mando, when he's called to it finally by the frog lady, for lack of a better term, which excellent practical effects on those costumes also. He's willing to stake his life on taking care of her and her offspring. So there's something, again, kind of noble about that willingness to not just focus on the grand scheme of things, but on the small. So anyway, finally he gets to this planet that she's directed him to, and he's directed to ultimately some other Mandalorians. And if you watch Star Wars The Clone Wars, then you'll know who these characters are, Bo-Katan and kind of her group. To be honest, I wasn't a fan of Bo-Katan in The Clone Wars. I'm really hoping that this is going to redeem her. They've got a great actress playing her. But anyway, I think the more interesting stuff comes from the realization that the Mandalorian, our Mando, is unknowingly part of what's considered an extreme religious cult, right? Because remember, part of his thing is that he will not remove his helmet in the presence of other people, and he would be dishonored as a Mandalorian if it were removed in combat. But of course, when he meets Bo-Katan and her kind, they take off the helmet, and he doesn't see them as real Mandalorians. In fact, he accuses them of stealing the armor that they're wearing. But what's interesting is, even though very clearly they are on different religious sides, if you will, they don't give up on each other, right? So Bo-Katan and her crew show up and they offer to get Mando a drink, and they sit and they talk and they come together on a mission. They have their own mission, and ultimately Mando agrees to go along with it because he wants to help the child. He wants to fulfill his mandate that's been given to him. So they figure they can at least kind of bond, even though they still call each other, like brother or sister. There's still this community that exists between the Mandalorians, even if there's this kind of uneasy sense of an alliance that's there. So I won't do a blow-by-blow of the entire episode, but suffice it to say, Mando has a moment where he is willing to sacrifice himself, more or less, for the sake of helping them fulfill their mission. And at first, Bo-Katan has kind of mocked him for this sort of religious extremism that she sees. And he isn't necessarily willing to go along with them. But at the end of the episode, when she gives kind of that crucial piece of information, which, yes, everybody who watched the Clone Wars be very excited. I'm excited that Ahsoka is going to come back, an incredibly well-written character in the Star Wars universe. So I knew there were rumors that she was going to show up, and so I'm really glad those rumors are true. I'm hoping that Rosario Dawson is going to be playing her. I've tried to stay as far out of any of this as possible, so I'm being pleasantly surprised so far. But there's this moment where, before he leaves, Bo-Katan says to him, "Your bravery will not be forgotten. This is the way." And so that's been the whole discussion back and forth of what is the way. Is it the way that the Mandalorian, that Mando sees through his, now we know, sort of extremist vision of things, which is not his fault, by the way. He was adopted and raised by this group. And I'll get to this group in a minute, what I think the connection is, because it's important. Okay, so they're very kind of narrow-minded on what it means to be a Mandalorian. And Bo-Katan and her kind, they've essentially lost their connection to their planet and to the ruling class, and Bo-Katan wants to reestablish that, what it means to be a Mandalorian. So they're sort of a little more floating in the ether, a little broader in their perspective. But they're able to come to an agreement that the way includes bravery. It includes that willingness to sacrifice oneself. And so, probably for the first time in a long time, there is this figure in Mando that seems to be part of this religious extremist group, bridging with more traditional Mandalorian society. So what I'm hoping is going to happen is that these two are going to come together and be sort of mutually enriched by each other, that maybe Mando will discover that, in fact, by being adopted by the Mandalorians, he wasn't just restricted to the way as it was taught to him, but actually that there is a whole society that he can enter into and be part of to kind of become more fully human. Right? That's, I think, a good indication of the helmet and all of that. So I'll be curious to see what they do there. But he is also redeeming perhaps some of the more religious dimensions to the Mandalorians, because Bo-Katan said he was part of the Watch. That's this cult's name. So in the Clone Wars, there's this group called Death Watch, and they are kind of the villains in Mandalorian society. And I find it interesting that Mando doesn't have any connection to that villainy. In fact, he is following what's good in the Mandalorian code as he knows it, because it's good, because it's a noble way of being. And so perhaps he's going to save what was noble in this sort of extreme cult and bring it back into Mandalorian society. So we'll see. I'll be really curious to see what they do, but it's really good. Suffice it to say, I'm really enjoying this. So, shorter reaction video because the episodes were a little bit shorter. Thanks for going on the deep dive of the Star Wars lore with me. But I'm super stoked to see what comes next, and a little sad because I just saw the headline today that we're probably not going to get any more Mandalorian until 2022. So I'm sorry if the episodes end on a huge cliffhanger, but that's what it looks like we're heading for. So we'll see, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.